Welcome to the Village of Cottage Grove Budget Review Committee meeting on Tuesday, August 19th, 2025. Hybrid meeting on Zoom and also in person at Village Hall. It is 5:30, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted. This is the public appearances, public opportunity to speak. We have no one in the room and there's no one on Zoom. So we will move on to discuss and consider the minutes of the Budget Review Committee meeting from October 14th, 2024.
I would make the motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
There's a motion by Heidi and a second by Jim. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
I'll abstain.
Motion carries. So we will move on to the main event for tonight, which is reviewing the 2026 Financial Management Plan and discussing and considering the recommendation to the Village Board. So I'll turn it over to Cameron.
I'm going to let Greg take the reins here, and then I'll kind of fill in as needed, as well as kind of just some general comments here at the end.
Thanks, Cameron. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to kind of start off, we'll just kind of restate kind of our objectives. The village has gone through this process now for several years from when the first financial management plan was completed several years ago. This is typically kind of part of the kickoff of your annual budget process. So what the financial management plan incorporates is really a multi-year look at all the village's operational funds that are funded through the tax levy, as well as your capital improvement plan, and kind of integrates it into kind of a long-term levy forecast. So we'll look at kind of a 6-year period, kind of a draft 2026 budget, and then a projection out from that point in time. We'll take a look at kind of several things that we normally evaluate in terms of state law compliance, particularly levy limits, as well as some of your existing financial policies and guidelines that you have in place. And again, this is really kind of an all-in model that really kind of serve as a springboard for ongoing budget discussions. Just to start off, we always like to kind of restate kind of some of the highlights from the village's rating reports. The village is rated by S&P, Standard & Poor's, every time you go out to the market, which has generally been annually. So to summarize some of the financial strengths and then some of the financial weaknesses that they've identified. In terms of the strengths, strong reserve position and liquidity. That's always been one of the village's strong financial benchmarks in terms of your fund balance and just strong financial management. They note, some of your policies and practices that you've typically followed, and they also know that you go through this process on an annual basis because we provide this information to them as well when we go into market and provide the background information. So they've view kind of your overall financial management framework, in their words, sophisticated and proactive, and encompassing a comprehensive budget model. In terms of financial weaknesses, they also see the capital side of it, and so they've noted that there's, been some larger borrowings and debt issuance, but that's particularly tied to some of your larger capital projects and investment. So that hasn't impacted your rating at all, and they note that again, the long-range planning is something they can see it coming, so that kind of helps in terms of understanding the context, and they know that you maintain a multi-year capital improvement plan that you're regularly updating and evaluating, so they know the capital projects and any debt issuance isn't made in a vacuum. It's part of a deliberate process. So that's, part of the messaging is that they can see things coming down the line, which is always beneficial versus, large projects that, appear to come out without much forewarning. So that's always helpful from the rating perspective. In terms of the village's fund balance, one of your policies is looking at your general fund balance, unassigned and unassigned. So here it kind of looks at, where you have trended over the past several years, very consistent, typically, at or above, 30% of that unassigned and assigned fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures. So very consistent, which is, reflected again in your rating report, something the rating agencies like to see, that your fund balance levels are healthy, but also consistently maintained at levels as shown here in the chart. When we get farther into the presentation, we're going to talk about levy limits. I know that's something you're all generally familiar with. They've been in place since 2005. Generally, the guidelines under levy limits is that you can increase your allowable levy by the percentage of net new construction from the preceding year or zero, whichever is greater. And then you're allowed to increase your allowable levy based on numerous adjustments that are allowed under the levy limit law. The one that's most typically used by the village and most communities in Wisconsin is adjustments for debt service. Any debt that's issued on a general obligation basis is fully exempt from levy limits, so you can levy whatever is necessary to repay your debt. In terms of that net new construction percentage, this kind of shows, the history of that going back, several years. So it shows the percentage for the budget year and then also, or levy year, excuse me, and then it kind of shows how that translates into an allowable levy increase. So it kind of shows where you've been at historically. We'll kind of look at some net new construction projections when we look at the levy limit analysis. But this is what you've been allowed to increase your levy by before we look at those other permitted adjustments. In terms of the valuation projections that we use in our model, the one that kind of guides the tax levy and tax rate projections that we'll show for debt, and then your total budget is really what are called the TID out values. And what is shown here is your equalized or market values. Those are certified annually by the Department of Revenue on August 15th, so that just occurred last week. So this chart was updated to reflect your most recent valuations as of January 1 of 2025. So your values as of 1/1/25 will dictate what your tax rate will be for your 2026 budget. So you'll see on the top half of this chart, you have kind of a 5-year history of your TID out value. You have the valuation year and the budget year. So the village's TID out value went up almost 11% from 2024 to 2025. In terms of our forecasting methodology, we'd like to be conservative in terms of our valuation projections. So we've taken that 5-year average and discounted it by 50%. So you'll see outside of TID adjustments, that really results in kind of a growth rate of about 6%. But you'll note in the chart down below here for your projected TID out values, there's some meaningful value coming online, mainly for the closure of TID 5, which will impact your 2027 budget. That's going to add $267,307,000 of value to your tax base, which will impact your tax rates for the 2027 budget. And then we've just factored in some other adjustments going forward for some known developments in progress that are outside of your TIF districts. But other than those kind of one-time adjustments, just projecting growth conservatively of about 6% per year, which is less than what you've seen for the past several years.
Greg, if you don't mind staying on that slide for just another second. Kind of one of the methodologies just from a consistency perspective with the revaluation and market years, we switched the approach to expressing everything in equalized value. Why the slide is important is there's an economic change of 3.75%. So if we're looking at valuation year of 2026, I've calculated the average home to be about $450,000 of equalized value. And then every year thereafter, if somebody's looking at this from an estimated tax impact, you'd add 3.75% to the equalized value and ultimately multiply it by the tax rate. After when this goes to the village board, I will kind of put some additional kind of information in the packet for kind of calculating 101 on how residents can make sure that they're reading this correctly.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chairman. So the tax bill includes two values, your assessed value and your market value. So equalized and market value mean the same thing. So if you take the tax rate that we'll show in this analysis and apply it to the market value on your home, you'll get the tax impact for the village portion of your tax bill. So in terms of the operating projections, there generally isn't too much variability here year over year in terms of the village's budget. Again, try to take a particularly conservative approach with our forecasting. So on the revenue side, in your general fund, your primary operational fund, your intergovernmental revenues, your shared revenues from the state, are increasing about 2% annually is what we forecasted. Similar increase for transportation aids. Then your special charges for refuse and recycling are increasing at about 2% to kind of keep up with costs for those particular services. And then most of your other non-levy revenue sources are remaining flat. So that's public charges for services, licenses and permits, things of that nature. Yes, they fluctuate year over year, but generally don't see wide swings in those revenue sources, and they're not your primary revenue source either. That's really your shared revenue and your property tax are really what are driving your budget. In terms of the general fund expenditure projections, so we do the expenditure projections on a line item basis, so literally take all the expenditure line items that are within your general fund for all your various departments and forecast those going forward. Each line item is assigned what we call one of these classification codes, depending on the type of expense that's incorporated into that line item. And so this is the forecasting methodology that we use. So we present this at kind of a higher summary level, understanding that when you go through your budget process, you're going to be going through, departmental budgets with a little more detail. But again, really the emphasis of the financial management plan is to really look, long term and kind of set the stage for where things are trending. And you'll certainly make revisions as you go through your budget process. But these are kind of the assumptions that we've discussed with staff in terms of using for the forecasting beyond 2026. So in terms of the general fund, kind of providing, again, that high-level summary of all of your revenue sources and expenditures. So your revenues are broken down by your primary categories that are typically presented in a similar fashion in your audit and in other state forms where the city reports its revenues and expenses. So the taxes line item is your property taxes, and then you have intergovernmental revenues, which is really your state shared revenue, your transportation aids, then licenses and permits, public charges, investment income, and then miscellaneous and other revenues. And then your expenditures are kind of broken out by general function, by governmental function. So you have your general government, public safety. We've broken down in a little more detail. That's police, fire, and then EMS. And then your other public safety expenditures are really inspection services. Then your public works, your health and human services, parks and conservation and development. So kind of trending out those expenditures, over the next couple of years, from 2025 to 2026, your general fund levy is projected to increase about 7.36%, and then it starts to moderate going forward over the next couple of years. So again, kind of based off of some growth in your intergovernmental revenues, and then the balance of really the budgets, the balance of the budget is balanced through your property tax levy, since your other revenue sources, fluctuate a little bit, but not too much over the planning model.
One thing I'll note for 2026, the current model, so most years you'll see 315,000 in that other category. So TID 5 is anticipated to have approximately $850,000 surplus paid to the village. 50,000 is being proposed in this model to reduce the impact of taxes this year. It's essentially a use of a fund balance from another fund. Part of the reason why I'm recommending it to be shown this way or presented this way is there's kind of three kind of bigger initiatives this year. One, the fire department's looking to go for pay per call. That has a relatively significant impact on this line. You can kind of see going from 154,000 to 237,000. That one line is a relatively large increase, and this helps step that gap so we don't have to take all of that gap increase in 1 year. And then secondly, both police and EMS are going through union negotiations. So what's presented in the general fund are operating dollars, and there is a portion of EMS and fire that is allocated to our capital projects fund, which is not currently levied for. But that is why we're showing $50,000 coming from TID 5. As Greg will kind of point going forward, there is $600,000 that is being proposed to use as cash on hand to reduce the police station borrowing, as well as $200,000 that will be used to help abate debt for 2026. And so since that's the next slide, I'll let Greg present it initially, and then I'll kind of walk through that a little bit more.
Thanks, Cameron. So yes, this next chart on page 11 is really the summary of your existing debt profile before we look at the impact of future borrowings over the 5-year planning period. So on the far left-hand side is just your gross principal and interest payments. There's other debt management expenses that are budgeted in your debt service fund. And then the village typically budgets several non-levy revenue sources to repay some of the general obligation debt, mainly revenue from TID districts that are paying a portion or all of their share of the debt service, revenues from the water and sewer utility for general obligation debt issued for utility-related projects. Premium is money that was received from prior debt issues that has to legally be spent on interest expense. And then the fund balance column is kind of what Cameron just mentioned, some application of fund balance in 2026 to kind of offset the debt service levy impact. So this is that net tax levy column. This is just where your property tax levy for debt is if you issued no other debt going forward. This is just where we start from. We'll show the impact of future borrowings in the next couple of slides for debt service.
And Greg, yeah, just if we can kind of stick on that 550,000. So that 550,000 is made up of 3 different numbers. One, the debt service fund has about $100,000 in its current resources to utilize. It's funds on hand that can be utilized to reduce levying for future debt. As I mentioned before, another $200,000 is going to be planned to be transferred in from TID 5 to reduce 2026 levy. The other $250,000 will come later this year to the village board. We are approaching the top end of our fund balance policy. With the uncertainty the last couple of years of coming out of COVID, inflation, I had kind of recommended staying on that higher end just in case there's unexpected expenditures or other significant downturn in the economy where we would want to use that. This is a perfect instance where we have this kind of year before TID 5 closes in 27 that providing some relief in the form of reducing our debt service levy is, in my opinion, the best way forward. So we're using nearly $500,000 of fund balance in debt service to, again, reduce the impact of the levy. In 2026, there's 0 impact to the police station. The police station borrowing, core borrowing, will be taken out later, either late this year or a portion late this year, beginning of 27. How those borrowings typically work is we take out money in a year and it doesn't actually hit the debt service levy until the following year. So there will be no impact on the tax roll until 2027. So that would be tax bills that are sent out in December of 26. So as we're reviewing kind of the subsequent slides, just to kind of have a mental note.
The next couple of slides are just a summary of the village's current draft of your multi-year capital improvement plan. So this chart on page 12 just depicts the portions that are related to the village, non-utility projects. So you'll see there's dollar amounts identified for vehicle and equipment replacement. Those are included in annual financings, but the amount that's borrowed for vehicle and equipment is amortized and paid off within a 5-year period. road, street, and trail maintenance amounts. Those are paid off within 10 years. You'll see the police station amount, which represents some of the cash that's being applied. That's kind of the net borrowing amount needed to complete that project based on your bids. And then you'll see, some other specific projects that are listed over the next several years. So really, the majority of the debt service is paid off, within 5 to 10 years, with, exceptions being some of your larger facility projects. Those are amortized over 20 years to take into account the maximum term for general obligation debt, but also just due to the useful life of those facilities that are, certainly going to have a useful life of at least 20 years. So, for the village capital projects from 26 to 31, you're looking at about 41.3 million of capital project costs.
And Greg, because of when this had to be in the packet into comparison to when a bid was awarded, I will work with Greg on getting a slide that shows in the financial management plan what the cost of the police station is and summarize it. Just because this is showing that $14.3 million net of cash that's being utilized. So I feel like that will be important to show. In addition, for those who are involved in the capital prioritization plan, our road and replacement schedule does not look like this every year. Right now is being proposed an every other year approach. From a pure planning perspective, this average will get us almost exactly what that impact would be based off of when the project years are. There are also, with working with the town and Kim, there's a relatively large amount of Pleasant Springs fund available to offset some of the ladder truck purchase. There's roughly $300,000 in there right now. Kim is working on determining what is the village's share of that total and what is the town's share. Right now, this $1.6 million shown in 2028 assumes that no cash in that Pleasant Springs fund is being used to offset that. However, with talking with Kim, it does sound like the town and the fire commission members would be open to utilizing some of those funds to offset that cost, because that's the primary purpose of those funds. And that's
Cameron, do we want the ladder truck as a 20-year note, or should that
yes.
be?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there are some, so one other thing that was talked about during the capital prioritization process is the project that's slated for 2027. Right now it's Community Park or Progress Drive. There were some conversations at the village board level about what makes sense to do that year. I think, and there are some board members who, once we get to the discussion portion of this member, one of the things that was talked about is could this project wait a couple years, or is that a project where Progress Drive should be a priority over the reconstruction of the community park? I will be able to speak to that project somewhat because a couple additional facts have come up since then. But I do believe Village Board will have a little bit more discussion on that on the 2nd. So that's kind of a placeholder because the value is about the same for both projects. So that could be a one or the other or none situation. This doesn't necessarily mean that the recommendation would be going forward with the project that year. Just further discussion needs to happen on that project. The one during village board conversations, there is some interest in pursuing a possible public safety impact fee. John Cameron will be at the September 2nd meeting to give a high-level overview of that. So right now, this current model is showing that the EMS and fire station improvements in 2031 would be completely debt funded and not and no impact fee dollars, reducing the cost of that station. So should there be material changes to that, that could also improve this 10-year plan, or 5-year plan here. Thanks, Greg.
For reference, we've included the utility projects, both those that are financed with cash and then those that are financed with general obligation debt. So this really will impact the presentation this evening primarily in terms of the village's general obligation borrowing capacity, because it will, include some water and sewer projects as well. But that's kind of been incorporated into, the village's long-range cash flow analysis for both the water and the sewer utility. But we've just included the list here for reference, just so you're kind of aware that those are incorporated into the debt issuance model as well. So in terms of just the kind of the multi-year financing plan, so just to kind of summarize, the dollar amounts that are included by year. So this is again based on the current version of the CIP. So 2026, kind of the full remaining amount of the police station project is included in that dollar amount. And then you just look at kind of the interest rate assumptions that we've used, kind of 4.25%, 4.75%, and then 5% for the remainder of the model, which is again intended to be included. And these include water and sewer utility projects. So in terms of, taking that capital list and understanding that you go through regular updates and revisions to that capital list, we've, made numerous changes to the financial model just within the last year as those changes have been brought forth. But based on those project amounts and those lists, this kind of shows the impact, to the, the debt service levy. So we have your existing debt service levy in the far left-hand side, the gross principal and interest for financings from 2026 through 2031. We show revenue from the water and the sewer utility covering their respective share of the debt, and then the balance of the debt service falls to your levy for debt. And so that's shown here in the total net debt service levy column. And then we show how that levy change will from year over year. So as Cameron mentioned, there's no impact for the police station financing in 2026 on the 2026 budget. That really hits the levy in 2027. So that's really what's kind of driving that larger debt service levy increase. That's kind of the impact of the police station project. And then the debt service levy increase is right around $660,000 per year based on the current version of the CIP. So the financing plan model goes out till 2031. So the next year in the cycle would be 2032, which would hit your debt service levy in 2033. So you'll see the debt service levy is projected to decrease in 2033. That's by design to kind of reflect the end of our planning model that goes out till 2031. So again, this is based off of that current project list, does incorporate the police station and trying to structure the debt for a fairly consistent levy increase, but obviously the police station project or any dollar amount really at that level is going to have a more meaningful impact just because you're not routinely borrowing for capital projects at that level. So then the taxes, the annual taxes, that just shows simply how much you're paying for every $100,000 of value, and then in terms of the debt service, just for the police station for the portion financed in 2026, that just shows the portion of taxes for every $100,000 in value just for that police station financing. So the all other taxes is all debt. The far right-hand column just isolates how much of that total is related to the police station.
So I think some discussion at the village board level, as well as kind of relevant here at budget review, is kind of a better understanding of the police station project. So if we look at 2027, so if we're talking about 2025 as being our base year at the average home being $450,000 of equalized value, there's no tax impact in 26. So if we move forward to 27, we add 3.75%. That would make the average equalized value on home $466,875. If you run this through at the $60.36 per 100,000, that's roughly $281.81 gross impact on debt service. So I'm working with my staff right now to hone in prior to the financial management plan being presented at village board. At this time, I'm estimating roughly $23 from an operating perspective, which would put year one of the plan at roughly $304.76. 2025 was the last year of the debt service payment for the municipal service building. In 2025, that dollar amount was $77. So when we start talking about net impact, we can kind of start with the 304 less 77, and we're getting to 228 net at that point. I'm not quite ready to present on the impact of TID 5, but I will be ready to speak to that at the September 2nd meeting. What shouldn't be a surprise is that number may end up being negative, because as you'll see in the upcoming slides, the equalized tax rate is actually anticipated to go down between 2026 and 2027. But that's kind of where we are in the model. And then, as you can see, year 2 goes from $60 to $37. And so, but our equalized value for the average home would go up to $484,383 on the average home, which would put our gross debt service at about $180.38. So we'll see, even after year 1, a little bit of a dip with the planned appreciation values of a home. Again, I want to make it crystal clear, we don't levy based off of equalized value, but this helps keep values consistent year to year. So you're not looking at assessed rate and seeing kind of those ebbs and flows versus the value. This is truly what the impact, and it's more comparable community to community.
So in terms of the village's general obligation debt limit as prescribed by statute, so you cannot exceed 5% of principal outstanding of general obligation debt. So this incorporates all the village projects and the water and sewer utility projects that were identified to be debt funded. And includes the police station as well. So you can see that, you're really kind of tapping out at about 50% of your debt limit, which is a very comfortable, range in terms of your, remaining borrowing capacity is, very healthy and sufficient. In terms of your direct debt burden, you're at about 50%, which, given you're taking on some larger capital projects is still a healthy place to be in terms of when rating agencies look at your direct debt burden, and just where you're at in terms of your capacity limitations.
And kind of one key change I want to call out from this financial management plan compared to the January 13th, 2025 update, is because we're at a lesser percentage of our debt capacity, it allows us to fund in this plan the utility projects with GO debt instead of revenue debt. Historically, from what I've seen, we can issue GO debt at a lesser interest rate than revenue debt. I can't put a delta to that, but historically, the cost to carry the debt is cheaper on a GO perspective.
So in terms of bringing all of this together to kind of see the big picture, really what's on slide 18 is really, kind of where we tried to get to in terms of, showing the trends and kind of the impact. So what we show here on this chart is kind of, by budget year 2022 through 2024 actuals, your 2025 budget, proposed 26, and then projections for 27 out through 31 is your total property tax levy. So really your levy presently consists of your general fund and then your levy for debt service. We break out the debt service levy by your existing debt, and then we add in, new debt issues going forward that have yet to be issued. And then, so we show your total levy in the yellow box, and then down below we show what that total equalized or market value tax rate would be for just the village's tax rate only. So, in 2025, the village's tax rate for its portion of the tax bill was $5.75 per thousand. So you'll see in 2026, that's projected to be at right around $5.78, so really kind of keeping that equalized tax rate flat. And then in 2027, Yes, you have kind of a larger uptick in your levy that's largely driven by debt service related to the police station, but because of the closure of TID 5 and the amount of value that's coming on to the tax rolls for the 27 budget, your equalized tax rate per thousand is projected to be $5.37 per thousand. So even though your levy's going up to absorb that debt service for the police station, your equalized tax rate's projected to go down. So kind of the benefit of timing a larger capital project and the debt issuance, debt service that impacts that with the closure of a large TID district that helps, increase your tax base. So there's the timing of that at least, works out as shown in this particular model. And then it shows how the equalized tax rate's projected to change over the planning period. So, again, this is kind of, everything kind of built in, kind of existing operations as well as the CIP, full funding of it as it's laid out here. So again, this is always subject to kind of changes as you go through your budget process, but just kind of shows how the levy and the tax rate are projected to change, throughout the planning period. I guess, Cameron, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
For anybody watching or who will look back at this, if you're looking at our budget timeline, this really sets, should and when Matt and I bring a budget to the village board, this is what sets kind of the ceiling, unless there's something dramatically changes that would be communicated prior to kind of the budget process. But this helps make sure that we're delivering on both budget review committee and village board expectations, that should we bring a budget forward that conforms to this plan, that it would be generally acceptable by both parties.
So in terms of levy limit compliance, so this is just kind of a summation of the levy limit worksheet and kind of the primary factors that drive the village's levy limit capacity. Just a couple things I want to point out here. When TID closures do occur, the village gets a one-time adjustment to its allowable levy increase, which really is your benefit to claim, but it just results in you claiming a smaller debt service adjustment on the worksheet. So for the TID 5 closure in 2027, that's estimated to increase your allowable levy by about $311,000, which again just reduces the amount of debt adjustment you need to claim on the worksheet. But based on your current, debt profile, your total gross general obligation debt service, not projecting any levy limit shortfalls, over the 5-year planning model, which is, kind of an improvement over different iterations that we've had with this over the years, and certainly just within the past year that we've had several kind of updates to this, as Cameron alluded to. So really, we're really just trying to kind of calculate the total projected allowable levy in this model, and could that be funded under levy limits with some assumptions. So you'll see for the net new construction, that's kind of highlighted in kind of the center part of the presentation. So we show kind of actual amounts for the last couple of years. So your net new construction amount for 2026 is known. Kind of the ramp up in 2027 is really kind of largely driven by Amazon. So that's kind of what you're seeing, that uptick. And then we just kind of show that, start to kind of decline going forward to kind of be conservative. But, your allowable levy increase for levy limit purposes is impacted by construction in your TID districts, even though you don't see the benefit of that incremental value until the TID district closes on the tax base, like you're seeing with TID 5 in 2027, but it does impact your allowable levy. So this chart just kind of depicts the total tax levy in orange and the tax rate on an equalized basis for the village only, kind of some historical data, and then where that's projected, kind of going forward. So just kind of shows that same information that was in the table, just depicts that graphically. Finally, I just want to provide some high-level comments on each of the village's TIF districts. We've been talking a lot about TIF district number 5. Again, that's going to close in 2026. That value will return onto the tax rolls for 2027. TID 6 has about $3,154,000 of incremental value, partially supports its debt service. That'll remain open until 2031. TID 8 has a little over $5 million of incremental value, has some what are called pay-as-you-go development incentives in place, where increment that is generated from particular developments go to reimburse costs per development agreements that were approved. TID number 9 has incremental value of over $55 million. There's some debt service outstanding for land acquisition that's being paid by the tax increment collected by this district. And then TID 10, these are all values as of 1/1/2025. Incremental value for that district is almost $39.8 million. And there's some existing pay-as-you-go development incentives for that district, which are in place but have not yet been paid out because the increment's just starting to get generated. So really all the TIDs are healthy. TID 6, which is one of the older districts, partially supports the debt service, but the rest of the districts, cover their debt or don't have any debt outstanding at all, and so they're in strong financial position.
And to kind of touch on TID 6, all of those projects would have been done anyways. From a timing perspective, it was, I think the goal when that happened was we're going to put these project costs in the TID and hope for the best. And so why the best didn't happen, it's not as if those were supporting direct development. So that is why there's that continuing obligation till 2031.
Yeah, it all funded public infrastructure. So just to kind of some final summary points. So in terms of the levy change, kind of over the 6 years in the model, 26 out through 31, the average levy change per year is 11% per year. The average equalized tax rate over those 6 years is $5.69 per thousand. And then your max utilization of your geo debt capacity rounded up is 52% in 2027. So just some kind of key financial benchmarks just to extract out from kind of all the detail that's in the plan.
Yeah, and kind of on the summary slide, I just want to point out it's 11% change in levy, not 11% increase in taxes year over year, because we are a growing community. As we're increasing and redoing roads and things, it's just spread over a bigger tax base each year over year. Yeah.
That concludes my formal comments. I'll turn it back over to you, Cameron, or however you all want to proceed.
So a couple things that we're gonna want to go over today. First, we'll have Greg address any questions, and then once Greg's done answering questions, I'll kind of talk about next steps with the plan, and then hopefully we can get a recommendation to village board and approve a recommendation. So I will leave it up if you guys have questions for Greg.
Thanks, Greg, for your presentation and for all the work you put in behind the scenes in your team. I've been on this committee for a number of years, and so we saw a levy limit gap in previous years. And so what would you say were the biggest contributing factors to not seeing that gap in this plan?
So I think a lot of what drives the levy limit calculation is what your allowable adjustment is for debt service. And so, as that, somewhat kind of started to moderate and you've just made other adjustments in your model, it just kind of eventually kind of started to work itself out. So, I mean, yes, there's been those gaps that we've been kind of projecting. And so as the CIP has gone through some pretty significant revisions over the last just year, because I know we've updated this model probably about 3 times within the last 12. That's not a complaint. I mean, it's, but I mean, that's, that shows, just kind of illustrates my point. I mean, there's been some, a lot of changes. So, I mean, I think as the model gets adjusted, and again, we run the levy limit compliance based on gross geo debt. So, I mean, while you can claim all of your geo debt on your levy limit worksheet, I mean, practically you're only, looking at what you need to claim to have your levy limit and your allowable levy and your actual levy be the same.
And then development that actually comes to fruition where maybe we're projecting and being conservative, you know, at some point when, you know, Amazon's actually building and we can see it and we're getting input from our assessors as to likely you know, what the value would be, we feel much more comfortable putting those actual figures in here, which helps too.
Yeah, your net new construction has been trending higher than what we've been forecasting, and I'd much rather communicate that message than the other way around.
What is the projected value of Amazon, just approximately?
About 295,
295.
295 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of there's two important development factors. Development that happens within a TID, which we do recognize that that benefit. So when a TID district is opening, it's covering its share of village staff salaries, as well as any direct expense to the TID district, as well as we'll see with TID 5, the significant impact that it has when we can bring all of that value back onto the tax roll. So what I've seen is, as we've done these models, the discount rate, in my opinion, kind of covers ourselves from a should a moderate decrease in the economy happen, the overall inputs in the model are still relevant, and there wouldn't be a significant deviation. Also, there's been, I think, several projects outside of TID districts that we don't typically include in this plan until there's direct either board approval or they're far enough in the process that we can say it's more likely than not it's going to happen. So sometimes in the middle of these updates, we'll get that, oh yes, this project is going to move forward, and so all of a sudden we come back and the model looks a little bit better than the year before. So a prime example of that is we were able to add the Heyday project into the projection with some value coming on in construction in 26, on in 27, construction in 25, 26. So there's 2 years of added value there that did help improve the position.
What is TID 5? What is TID 5? I'm just curious.
It's largely Commerce Park. So I mean, it's pretty much encompasses, you know, all the development that's in there, kind of going up Cottage Grove Road, and you know, some of the you know, more recent retail strip developments. So yeah, it includes all that value.
It runs south to and then a little bit north as well, but there's the Houston parcel that's west of the Park and Ride, just hasn't developed, but that's in TID 5 as well.
And if we kind of go back one slide, Greg, I mean, this is just really shows the magnitude of this project. So the entirety of the Commerce Business Park is $257 million increment. So Amazon's projected to be 295 million.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about 2038, 2039 projected closure, you know, we'll start as staff kind of looking at projects that, significant projects that may need to be done, and try to align what our future growth may need to help alleviate.
Okay.
On slide 10, can you maybe describe the breakout of the public safety, specifically the fire/EMS? Does that include ESB, or is that?
So that's a typo.
Yeah, it's a typo. Sorry.
That should just be fire.
No, I saw that earlier when I was going through it. The first line, public safety fire, that's just fire. The next line's EMS.
All right,
So
can you describe what public safety other is then?
inspection services.
Okay.
And a little bit of ESB funds.
So some of that is defined, that's how, Cameron, correct me if I'm wrong, but statutes play, you know, kind of put these categories out there for us to assign our expenditures to, and generally that's where building inspection gets kind of outlaid.
Yeah, and so while we've historically presented this as public safety in the past, during previous updates, we've been asked to provide a little bit more detail on that because they make up significant portions of our budget.
Just was curious for license and permits in 2024. What's the bump Was that Amazon too, or?
Yep.
Okay.
So
Yep.
2024 license and permits, that was the building permit. You'll also see in public safety other 1.3. So there's a corresponding amount that we pay to the provider that does those services for us. I do want to point out too, from a revenue, like a licenses and permits perspective, we've had a decent amount of commercial development over the last several years. That is not sustainable. So that is why when Greg is talking about the revenue models kind of doing flat, there are some conservative numbers in there. You know, the intergovernmental revenue, I can almost guarantee it's going to be the same amount, if not slightly higher than the prior year. But when we start talking about investment income and permit revenue, stuff that's highly variable and market driven, that's where we could get ourselves in trouble. Like some communities use that investment income line as a plug. We can make that number as high as we want in the budget, but ultimately we're only going to realize what the market dictates. So I would rather transfer additional funds into the debt service fund or capital project fund after having positive performance than trying to levy for in subsequent years to make sure we're within our fund balance policy.
And I think most know this too, but by how the market fluctuates from an investment standpoint, we're not talking about equities. We're not investing in it. So these are CDs and money markets and governmental securities. So exactly. Well, yeah, not even index funds. Yeah.
So prime example of this, if you look in 2022, the general fund had investment income of $32,000. If you look at investment income in 2024, at $421,000, one would say, well, let's bump up the investment income. The problem with that is if we don't have that revenue, so if we go back to 32,000, we only can increase our levy by net new construction. So it creates a potential structural deficit. So kind of to that extent, not planning for that additional increase, but if we do realize that it gives us flexibility in our budget in subsequent years. Any other questions for Greg?
I guess that was one thing that then we should keep an eye on. Is there anything else that we should, I mean, obviously you monitor all of these things, but is there another place that you would point us that really we should hone in or think about as, you know, we continue to update this in the future?
No, I mean, I think I agree with a lot of Cameron's comments. I mean, there are certain revenue sources that are variable, and, you know, in my opinion, it's better to react to that when you get favorable results versus expecting the favorable results to come. And, you know, the challenge that all local governments kind of face in Wisconsin is that it's a property tax driven system, and your other non-levy revenue sources, while, you know, they certainly help provide some income. I mean, they're not generally at the level sustainable to sustain services year over year. And so, you know, relying on those to carry the day, you know, I don't think is a sustainable strategy. I mean, you may luck out one particular year, but then you're just making it harder that next year. So, you know, the approach that Cameron kind of laid out in terms of, you know, reacting to positive things and using it to, you know, fund some capital or reduce your debt levy is a more responsible way to do it than to count on something favorable to happen and then it doesn't. You know, I mean this sincerely. I think it's great that you go through this exercise every year, because I think it's enabled you to kind of make decisions and pivot and adjust. And I mean, that's the point of doing this, because, you know, I say this somewhat jokingly. The one thing I'll guarantee is the numbers in this model will change. I mean, that's a given, but I think you're able to kind of see where things are going and, you know, make some changes. And the village is in a very strong financial situation. And, you know, I would, from a policy decision, at least that's a good place to start.
Thank you.
So Cameron, what are some things you want us to discuss?
All right, so a couple things. Recommendation to village board, because Budget Review Committee does not provide any feedback on the capital projects. I do think it would be good for there to be some discussion on the community park and or Progress Drive in that model. Some kind of updated news on the community park perspective. We've worked with our insurance company, and they have advised us because of the ADA inaccessibility and other kind of degradation of that park that we should not allow it to be rented out. So it will not be rented out or a rentable shelter in 2026. The community may use it, but it is not going to be an amenity that we will be renting out. Kind of talking with Kyla on Progress Drive, the thought process would be if we would do it that year, we would have construction of the police station. Once the police station is complete, that would be the perfect opportunity to go through and replace Progress Drive. Talking with her a little bit more on that, she thinks that maybe a year or two early. So that might be something for us, as that is a 2027 project. That is just something for us to monitor and provide feedback on, because if it's a year or two early and there's greater needs, that there's only a limited amount of resources we have. So providing kind of clear direction to the village board that on what you'd want it to be considered would be good. But the kind of new news between when the capital prioritization plan was discussed was that community park is in an area where we unfortunately can't rent it out. I know Sean was working on, a couple board members asked, well, what is the minimum we could do to address the several deficiencies? And so he'll be available at the September 2nd meeting to kind of discuss some of those things. And just to be very clear, after you're done talking about that, just kind of running some rough math here. So this plan, as presented, would represent I apologize. So between 2025 and 2026, again, as presented, would be roughly a $248 tax impact. 26 to 27 would be a $99 decrease in taxes, and then kind of evens out the subsequent years with about between $160 and $170. As we have done in the past, we like to come back significantly better than what is proposed in here. Some challenges to that would be things that kind of are outside of our control. So if you look on page 18, no decisions that can be made can reduce our current debt service. So the difference between the 2025 and 2026 levy, so we have to cover the mid $300,000 increase just to pay our debt service payments on projects that have been previously approved. So what we would potentially, if we would want to see a tax decrease from the 248, we would be looking at decreased costs or potentially consideration of increased utilization of fund balance.
Just a friendly amendment, Cameron, we'll try to come back significantly better. I guess we'll try, but I think just our goal will be, it'll be better than what's in here and strike significantly.
Okay, so you want the committee to talk about Community Park or Progress Drive for 2027.
I guess one question I had about community park, more information. So it's not rentable, but still usable, like for people that are playing pickleball. Will it be able to use the restroom there, or will we need like a porta potty there, like closed?
There's still some additional discussion with the insurance team. I think originally we thought it would be fine to have bathrooms there and use and continue. I think there's some concerns about the inherent accessibility of park and park infrastructure. And so it could be a possibility that we'd have to put in some type of accessible porta potty system.
Okay, but still open, but someone that needed the accessibility aspect of the porta potty could utilize that. So
Yeah.
it'd be like kind of a double coverage. Because I think closing the building up totally for me, that would put that above Progress Drive, especially if Progress Drive is a few years earlier. So, I guess those are the things I'm weighing on that.
Yep, a couple of things to factor. So we've had some good development. I think the board could have a conversation with Sean about a balance of park development fees that they'd be willing to help offset the cost of it. I think timing, I think could be, so is 2027 the right year? Is 2028 the right year? I think we've done a whole bunch of community park improvements. So we've done the pickleball courts, the baseball fields I think are going to get redone a little bit later this year. So that kind of also raised the question, where does that fit in the kind of the grand scheme for the village?
Yeah, and the park development fund supplementing some would be, I think, a great use there too.
So you said Kyla said that she thinks it's a year or two early for Progress Drive?
The problem with Progress Drive in that specific year is it's so far away from any of the other projects that we're doing, and it would only be that road. And so it's a combination of, from a cost per square foot perspective, it's going to be significantly more than other projects. However, given the use of that building, if it's a priority, she said it would be, it was something we could do. But ideally, we would either do that road in 28 or in 26. 26 would be kind of silly with the project going on, because 28 we would could just increase the kind of plan that I think we're planning to do roughly $2 million of work. We could just add it and just do 3 million. I don't want to say just add it, but that could be a way to help kind of compromise on, we know it needs to be done. It would just be a year later, but we'd get better contract prices for, a contractor would view that as more favorable.
There was previous discussion about that intersection, though, right, of Progress and Bonnie? And
Yeah.
having that done along with the project.
The curb radius is pretty wide and.
Yeah, crazy wide, yeah, for walking.
But is that
Right.
part of the road reconstruction, or is that separate with the police station? I guess. is the
It's
question. I
not-
thought that that was
It's not part of
Yeah.
the police station project.
So that's part of the Progress Drive project.
It would be part of the progress track. So you would be in this situation, there'd be about a year where that wouldn't be addressed.
I guess my question would be, when she says it's a year or two away, is that taking into account all the construction traffic for the police station? Because it's in pretty atrocious shape already.
Sure.
And adding all the construction traffic for 18 months or whatever, I don't know, that's gonna be pretty bad.
Yeah, and I guess I should say, so when I'm saying a year or two away, we're hyper focused on cost per square foot. So it might make sense from needing to get it done because it's by a center that does have a public safety component, but from a cost per square foot perspective, that's not the recommended year.
Yeah,
Linear foot, yeah.
right. I mean, it's hard because both of them are in, the community park and Progress are both in rough shape, so they both need to be done, but.
And two, there is with the prioritization next year, it's also something that can kind of be refocused on as well. Not that I want to put a pin in those conversations, because it would be good for Kyla and Sean to have clear direction on what to bring forward.
But do you need to budget for A&E in 26 in order to do community park in 27?
Yes.
Or is that A&E in
So
27
it
for
would be
28
more, it
construction?
would be more important to do so you could probably, from an engineering perspective, get in beginning of 27 and then do the project end of 27 for Progress Drive. From a community park, because there's electrical, bathrooms, ADA, you would want to get that work done late 26. So you could bid it out and have that work happen in the spring.
Can we go back to the Pleasant Springs Fund for the ladder? I promise this ties in. So how much money were we talking about again? The potential, like if we pair the, some park development fund with the reduction of whatever Pleasant Springs Fund would reduce our portion of the ladder truck, like, is that getting to be enough money that, you know,
close.
maybe we can do community park with that without, and then maybe some of the cost savings of bundling all of our 2028 road projects with Progress Drive, like, I don't,
So you would be talking about doing community park in 27 and then do progress in 28 along with the other road projects, assuming that there could be some park development fees and savings on the ladder truck.
We say Progress Drive, whatever year, it's gonna have to be Dunkel Court too, right? Because there's no point in doing Progress Drive and not doing Dunkel Court.
It's a big stretch of road, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I can have that answer for September 2nd.
yeah, that'd be good. Let me throw in one more thing here. If, we talked about this last night, so at Progress Drive, getting over to, toward Bakken and like the crossing the railroad, which is like out of our control a little bit, but, you know, that might be a good time if we already have, you know, to create that pedestrian crossing there. If that can happen, you know, it might take 2 years to work with the railroad to come up with a plan on how to get people across it, but I guess we can pass that on to Kyla too, like, that's not that big of a stretch to add on to this project, but if there's people working on roads right in that area, that might be a good thing too.
Bike path to Bakken on Vilas? Or bike
Right, yeah, on Vilas,
Not
at the end
the
of Progress
illegal
too.
cut through in between. Okay.
Right,
Just wanted to clarify.
although I have always thought a bridge over the railroad would be a good idea where that is, but I know that's not gonna happen.
It is in the CIP for 2028 for Vilas Road Path connection to Bakken Park.
Well, then maybe that is fitting for Progress to be with that, maybe.
I guess I thought we had the conversation at the village board level about community park and really pushing it off. And so I guess I'm surprised that there's all of a sudden new information that brings it to us a lot sooner.
It's a 50-year-old building, right?
I know last year we had
So-
10 years left on it, and then all of a sudden this year it was pushed up, but then we pushed it back at village board, and now we're like all of a sudden there's new information and it's back at the forefront. And so I guess I'm surprised by that, and I don't like being surprised.
Okay.
So.
I will, so for the
Just feedback.
second, I will work with Inga to get kind of the summary of the kind of what changed between kind of when we initially analyzed it and just so we have it in the packet so it's kind of clear to residents. Kim did finish calculating what our portion of the Pleasant Springs funds are for that could be applied to the ladder truck, and that's 182,700. And there'll be 2 more payments yet this year that will increase that balance. So a total, I think, of 6 payments before the ladder truck would be purchased. So again, provide some flexibility. This is good news, unexpected news. So helps with flexibility in the future.
I'm assuming you need better direction on the community park or Progress Drive or the combined Murphy ideas to
Yeah,
Or
I
if
think
the
there,
rest of the board wants to weigh in on that. Some shrugs all around. I guess I would like to see I agree with Heidi's maybe combined approach to using park development funds along with maybe, what else did you say? Oh, Pleasant Springs and to offset and kind of shuffling the projects so that they kind of meet up in those years, 27, 28. Chris, say something. Push the button.
I wasn't like I have a sort of amorphous idea in my head, but I don't know how that gets from here to out my mouth. But when we do streets and road maintenance bids and stuff, I mean that's usually for rehab. Is a new path something that we can roll into something like that?
so, so yes, I mean, so that bucket would be ideally, doing like a kind of an additional path would be as a result of like either a bid coming significantly lower, so we'd have an alternate so the board could act on it. My fear would be, if that $1 million kind of buck is intended to do kind of recycle through existing roads, that would, if we would be using it on new infrastructure. But I wouldn't say, the board can make that decision. I would say it would be generally allowable.
And then there's a significant number of roads scheduled in 2028. Would there be any that we would have to flip with the progress that's scheduled for 2030, progress in Dongle? Or would we just add it?
So if we would add it, I would recommend just adding it, if Kyla confirms, and then what we would do is we'd look for opportunities in the plan to save the corresponding dollar amount. Because while these are like preliminary allocations, it's ultimately however we shift within those allocations is fine. So we would try to find somewhere in this 5-year plan how to do a corresponding decrease. And I'm not an advocate of spending more money, because the police station project did come back such, way less than anticipated. There is flexibility in the plan. I do think it would be good to try to, function within kind of this plan and not increase expenditures dramatically. But that's not saying that it would be impossible now to fit the Commerce Park or the Community Park and Progress Drive.
There was another thing that we wanted to go back to.
Just general feedback on tax impact.
I have a quick follow-up back to the community park. I just got a response from Inga that this was the first, so our insurance provider has been with us for a little over a year, and this was the first year they evaluated the facility, so this was their first look at it, so that's where that changed as well. Anyway, that's where that came from.
Do we know how much revenue we get from that park? It can't be that much, right? It's not like it's going to be a huge.
So there's a combination of a deposit and charge for it. If we would redo that facility, the fees would be closer to what Bakken is than what community is. Community is way less just because of the age of the shelter.
But it's not like we're going to be taking a huge hit if we don't rent it out next year.
Correct. Yep. I think when the insurance company looks at it, they look at it risk versus revenue, and so it in their opinion the economics weren't there.
What else do you want us to discuss?
I'm not quite sure if I've heard consensus on how to give village board a recommendation on community park. If you'd like it seen in here, and then Progress Drive be added to the proposed addition to the 2028 road maintenance budget. That is a way we could present it, or vice versa.
It's kind of hard because it depends on the answers that you were going to gather for September 2nd, right? So, I don't know. I'm good either way, I guess.
So for the purpose of this committee giving a recommendation back to the village board, could we include the Progress Drive project in 2028 after the station is complete? And that would match up with the Vilas Road path connection too, and hopefully there could be some efficiencies that are gained there. Using the Pleasant Springs Fund to offset portions of the ladder truck in 2028 as well. And then pending additional information from the community park, keeping that in the 2027 budget for now. No, and, you know, we had talked about, you know, the village board was given 3 different options to kind of evaluate on if we wanted like a full 4-season building, or, you know, different options. And I think we kind of had settled on the reconstruction of the park shelter, but we had pushed that off. But now giving new information, bringing that back in, and knowing that the village board might want to either, you know, not rent it and push it off to the 2030 mark, which I think is what I maybe suggested, but we could, this committee could bring it in 2027 and kind of realign the other projects.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I was following it.
Are you following it?
Yeah.
Did that make any sense? Because, okay.
I'll be able to get granted.
Just rewatch it.
And if Lisa follows it for our motion, because I'm sure that'll be part of it later.
Yeah, so Cindy, are you making the motion and Chris is seconding that?
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other comments or questions, things they would like to discuss or give recommendation to the village board?
I think that makes sense with community park in progress.
Sounds good.
Based off what I've heard from your discussion last night, I didn't watch the meeting, I'm sorry.
You didn't watch like all 5
I
hours
didn't watch
of
all
it?
5 hours of it, I do apologize. But
Cameron, anything else that needs to be added into that motion? Otherwise,
Yeah, we're ready.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. So that just leaves number 6.
Oh, one quick thing
Oh.
before adjournment.
Sorry. It's not on the agenda, Cameron.
I don't care. Just so the budget review committee is aware, we did create a 2026 community involvement budget form online. We'll continue to push it out. Any feedback that's given, we'll bring to the budget review committee when we meet next.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion and a second, non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.